This morning, Louise Sylvan mentioned that, the usefulness of data can be a bit sort of hard to gauge without the data being out there so that people work out what to do with it. I think that's really true. It's like bus routes. You don't really know who's going to catch a bus until the bus is there. This is where Victoria is a great example because we've got all this data in Victoria and have had it for several years. So people have been doing stuff with data. And what I'm doing in this presentation is just to show some examples of the way that people and organisations are using customer data to benefit customers. I'm sort of assuming smart meters, there's other ways to get sort of rich energy data, but smart meters are probably the most likely because they're sort of rolling out eventually. Some of the commentary in Victoria has been that, smart meters haven't really brought many consumer benefits. And I did hear someone say earlier today that smart meters are dumb, and I have sympathy for that view. But I sort of disagree. I guess we see a lot of great examples of using data, and I think that there is good value for consumers as long as the right pathways are there for that value to be realised in a way that benefits consumers. So I'm going to look at sort of three main different ways that consumers can use their energy data. And probably the most useful and probably want to spend a bit more time on is the use of historic energy data. As long as there's an awareness that future usage can be different to past usage, past usage can be a really good indicator for a lot of things. But as Alan from Choice mentioned earlier, most consumers need help from someone else to actually get the value out of their data. Because that's your energy data. For most people, it's not very useful. There's a heap of utility in there, but most people don't know what to do with it. You need someone with the right skills and the right knowledge to transform that into something useful. Now, one thing that most Victorian households have access to, though a lot of them probably don't access it, is all our energy distributors have these online portals where you can set up an account and then they can show you all this info about your usage. And it's more useful to some people than others. A lot of people struggle with things like graphs. But there is pretty useful info there anyway, just in terms of, your usage is down, it's up, here's how much you use different times of day. There's a function on there where you can download your energy data for other purposes. And this particular portal also has a page where you can go and do energy offer comparisons because they use the data they've got with you and they've got their own little comparator built on there. We also have the Victoria Energy Comparator, which is our version of Energy Made Easy. And this actually lets you download your data and upload it into this and give you an energy comparison based on your actual data from all available offers in the market. That's mine. I'm not on the best offer, but I'm close. They change so quickly. That's still difficult for a lot of consumers. I reckon that this website's pretty easy to use. I reckon Energy Made Easy is pretty easy to use. I hear a lot of people say, no, it's too complicated. I accept that. It's probably easier for me than it's probably easier for a lot of us and for a lot of other people. And the process of getting your data into there can be difficult, and there's a lot of failures when people try to download their data and upload it because you need computer skills and it's a complicated thing for a lot of people. But it can be done and it works well when you can do it. And it is a good value. If the process was simpler, and I think the green button type thing is really exciting, if you could just go to this site and go, here's my identifying info, push a button, get my data for me, put it in there, that would be so much easier. And that, I think, is one of the promises of the CDR if it goes well. There's also a great opportunity for other third parties to help consumers, and this is just an example of what we at Renew use when we do energy assessments. We don't necessarily show customers all this data because graphs are really bamboozling for a lot of people, but as an energy advisor to a person coming in for a consult, there's a heap that you can see on this spreadsheet of charts. Like, for example, I can see right now, what the hell were you doing in April that you used so much electricity compared to your average daily usage? That's the sort of thing that a customer might not realise. You can identify high standby power usage. You can give advice about appliances because you can sort of figure out appliance usage. It's all in the data, and you just need the skills to get it out of the data so that you can talk about it with a customer. And I think that shows the real value of the third-party thing. And it's not necessarily, it wouldn't have to necessarily be like a paid third party, like your community organisations with the right people could do this for clients that they're working with to help them understand their usage. The other thing that we do at Renew is help people sort of purchase size and scale solar systems. And we can actually use that energy data along with other sort of data to sort of work out, if you had a system this size, based on your historic usage, this is how much you would save, this is how long it would take to return the value to you. If you did this differently, this is what would happen. It's really useful. Again, it involves a third party, but there's quite a consumer benefit for consumers who want to do that. In that process, we can also, looking at the data, again, with some know-how on how to manipulate data, if the consumer is saying, next year we're having a baby and I'm going to be home full-time looking after it, that's going to change your usage a heap. But we can actually look at that data and go, okay, we can adjust it and go, well, here's what it would be like if you're in that situation. That's one of the big challenges for energy audits and assessments, is those sort of changes. So that's all sort of the historic data. I could really go on about that for an hour, but I won't. Real-time data is something different, and I think it's probably got a bit less usefulness, but it's got there's some ways it does work really well. I really think that one of the big untapped opportunities in Victoria was in-home displays. They can be really useful. They store historic data, which is not that useful compared to like those distributed portals, but most of them have this little traffic light symbol on them that shows if you're using a lot or a little electricity right now. I've got one in my house. I find that really, really useful. If I just walking past this thing and it's got this little red light, I sort of go, whoa, what's on that's using so much electricity? That's the sort of thing that's helpful for people who are trying to be more aware of their usage, but don't really know where to start. I think real-time access to data in the house could also be useful to energy auditors. Add a bit of extra value to what they can do. It might be useful to some sort of remote services like demand management that I'm not really sure, because I'm not across the technical details of how those work. But I think there's a few opportunities in real-time data that could be good. Just very quickly, we've talked a bit here, but not much, about access to aggregate data for like researchers and advocates. The framework needs to really work well to make sure the right protections and consent and privacy is in there, but you can do a heap with that. The Victorian Essential Service Commission used access to a heap of metadata in working out the value of distributed generation in a recent inquiry. We at Renew also used it when assessing the impact of cost-reflective network tariffs on different types of households. We used data from Ausgrid that had demographic data also attached to it, so we could go, here's what happens to low-income households on this particular cost-reflective tariff. There are risks and challenges that need to be in place, that need to be addressed. I think we've talked about them a bit today. Access rights is a real bugbear. It's really difficult for third parties in Victoria. We have to get consumers to get their own data and give it to us before we can do our work. That sort of cuts out a lot of consumers. We worked a bit with a third-party company also who was trying to do a sort of cheap energy switching service, and they just couldn't make it work in the end because it was just too hard for consumers to get their own data. Good third-party access could be really improve that. There's a lot of other issues. I think we've talked a bit about them. My time is up, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.